This week, we are looking at a Part 2 cue card that asks you to speak about a time when you visited a new place. Remember, if you find these YouTube exercises helpful, I do appreciate you hitting that like button. Let's read through the cue card together. Talk about a time when you visited a new place. Please say where you were, why you went there, what you did, and explain how you felt in that place. In the model, you will hear the candidate talk about visiting a park in their city for the first time. In their response, they talk through each of the bullet points on the cue card. So they discuss the reason why they went to this particular park, what they did at the park, and how the park made them feel. In a moment, we will listen to the full speaking sample, but remember that if you are having trouble with IELTS speaking, the shadowing resources at IELTSspeakingblog.com can really help you to expand your vocabulary and train for greater pronunciation and fluency. The website now has over 70 shadowing exercises, all of which were scripted by active examiners using real IELTS questions from the past 2 years. Come to the website and click Start this week's exercise to get started. Okay, here's the full sample this week. Let's now listen to the model. Remember that you should be noting any new language or vocabulary you come across while listening to this demonstration.
Now I would like you to speak on the topic of new places for 1 to 2 minutes. Start speaking now, please.
About a year ago, my friend and I took a train across our city to visit a public park we had never been to before. We were a bit on the fence about going because the weather forecast called for rain, but the park was hosting a food festival on that day only, so we decided to chance it. Luckily, not only did the rain stay away, but it actually turned out to be a rather pleasant afternoon, and we even got some sunshine. The festival featured numerous stalls where people from across the country cooked traditional foods from their region. My friend and I are both from Hanoi, so we were already familiar with most dishes, but it was nevertheless enjoyable to find grilled items and sauces that we hadn't eaten in a long time. I remember having some traditional pastries with spicy dipping sauce, and a little later in the day we both enjoyed a selection of barbecued seafood and meats. Some of the flavors brought me right back to my childhood. I think we both found it hard not to feel a little nostalgic. The park is really beautiful and has many scenic walkways, and this gave us the opportunity to stroll around leisurely and stop at times to admire the pond or just watch what other people were doing. We didn't really do much aside from this, but I found the whole experience calming and refreshing. There were a few buskers performing funny skits, and I recall some people practicing softly on musical instruments, which gave the afternoon an even more relaxing aura. So you can see that the candidate uses the cue card to help prompt them and remind them of additional things they can speak about. They do a good job of expanding on these prompts to include a variety of things that they saw or that they heard and experienced during the visit. And they also describe several different feelings they had while they were at this new place. Their speaking is organized and makes good use of linking language, and there are no filler words or unnatural pauses during the demonstration. Okay, we are now going to start the try stage of Learn, Try, Apply, and at this stage you will do a shadowing exercise that uses these 2 sentences from the sample. I'll read them to you now just to refresh your memory. So the candidate says, "About a year ago, my friend and I took a train across our city to visit a public park we had never been to before. We were a bit on the fence about going because the weather forecast called for rain, but the park was hosting a food festival on that day only, so we decided to chance it." Let's now start the shadowing exercise. If this is your first time doing a shadowing exercise, remember that you actually have to speak as you listen to this episode. So you will hear the sample, and then you will be given a pause within which to repeat what you have heard. And the point is to try to make your speaking sound as close to the sample as you possibly can. Okay, here is this week's shadowing exercise. Enjoy.
Now I would like you to speak on the topic of new places for 1 to 2 minutes. Start speaking now, please.
About a year ago, my friend and I took a train across our city to visit a public park we had never been to before. About a year ago, a year ago, a year ago, about a year ago, my friend and I took a train across our city. My friend and I took a train across our city. Across our city. Across our city. Train across our city. Took a train across our city. To visit a public park we had never been to before. Public park. Public park we had never been to before. Been to before. Been to before. We had never been to before. To visit a public park we had never been to before. About a year ago, my friend and I took a train across our city to visit a public park we had never been to before. About a year ago, my friend and I took a train across our city to visit a public park we had never been to before. We were a bit on the fence about going because the weather forecast called for rain, but the park was hosting a food festival on that day only, so we decided to chance it. We were a bit on the fence about going. On the fence. On the fence. About going. About going. We were a bit on the fence about going. Because the weather forecast called for rain. The weather forecast. The weather forecast called for rain. Called for rain. Because the weather forecast called for rain. But the park was hosting a food festival on that day only, so we decided to chance it. hosting a food festival on that day only. Food festival. Food festival. On that day only. On that day only. So we decided to chance it. Chance it. Chance it. So we decided to chance it. So we decided to chance it. But the park was hosting a food festival on that day only, so we decided to chance it. We were a bit on the fence about going because the weather forecast called for rain, but the park was hosting a food festival on that day only, so we decided to chance it. We were a bit on the fence about going because the weather forecast called for rain, but the park was hosting a food festival on that day only, so we decided to chance it. I hope you found that exercise helpful. Remember to subscribe, and if you found the content helpful today, please leave a like on this video. Go to IELTSspeakingblog.com to access the full library of shadowing exercises. Thank you for watching, and tune in again next week for another shadowing exercise.